The wine glass hits the marble floor and shatters into 100 pieces of light. Darian Knox does not flinch. He stands over the mess, tray balanced on one palm, and looks straight into the eyes of the man who threw it. Graham Holloway leans back in his chair, smiling like he just won something. His guests around the table go quiet, forks frozen halfway to their mouths. The restaurant's low gold lighting catches the sweat forming on the back of Darian's neck, but his face stays still, calm, almost bored. "You poured the wrong vintage," Graham says, loud enough for 3 tables to hear. "Do you even know what a 1998 Bordeaux tastes like, or did they just hand you a tray and a name tag?" Laughter ripples from his guests. One woman covers her mouth. Another lifts her phone, angling it just enough to catch the moment. "Hi viewers. Quick question before we go further. If someone humiliated you in front of a room full of strangers, would you snap back, or would you stay quiet and let your actions speak first? Type your answer below. I want to know." Darian sets his tray down on the service stand beside him. Slow, deliberate. He picks up the napkin from his shoulder, kneels, and starts collecting the broken glass with his bare hands, piece by piece, like it costs him nothing. Graham isn't finished. "This is why I don't tip men like you. You people always find a way to disappoint." The room holds its breath. A waiter nearby stops moving entirely, tray trembling in his grip. Even the bartender across the room stops polishing the same glass he's been polishing for the last 30 seconds, straining to hear what happens next. Darian rises to his full height. He looks at Graham for a long moment, longer than anyone in the room feels comfortable with. Then he speaks, voice even, no shake in it at all. "Go ahead, mock me again. Nobody expects that." Graham's smile falters, just slightly, like a man who threw a punch at air and missed his footing. His guests shift in their seats, unsure whether to laugh or look away. Darian doesn't wait for a response. He turns, walks toward the kitchen doors, tray balanced, spine straight, like the whole restaurant isn't staring at his back. At a corner table near the window, a woman in a charcoal blazer sets down her fork. She hasn't touched her food in the last 10 minutes. Her name is Elise Carrington, and she has watched this entire exchange without blinking once. She doesn't call out. She doesn't intervene. She simply watches Darian disappear through the swinging kitchen doors, and something in her expression shifts, quiet and sharp, like she just found a piece of a puzzle she didn't know she was solving. Her assistant, seated across from her, leans in. "Ma'am, are you all right? You've barely eaten." Elise doesn't answer right away. Her eyes stay fixed on the doors Darian just walked through. "Find out who that waiter really is," she says finally, voice low enough that only her assistant can hear it. Behind the kitchen doors, Darian leans against the steel counter, breathing hard for the first time all night. His hands are shaking now, glass shards still pressed into his palm, small cuts blooming red across his skin. He doesn't cry, he doesn't curse. He just closes his eyes, pictures his daughter's face waiting for him at home, and reminds himself why he walked away, instead of throwing the first punch his body wanted to throw. Because somewhere out there, in a small apartment 3 train stops away, an 11-year-old girl is waiting up past her bedtime, and she needs her father to come home in one piece, not in handcuffs. What nobody in that dining room knows, what even Darian himself doesn't know yet, is that the woman by the window just made a decision that will change both of their lives forever. And she has no idea yet how close she came to changing everything that same night. With one sentence, she almost said out loud. The alarm on Darian's phone goes off at 5:15, and his hand is already reaching for it before the first buzz finishes. He sits up in the dark, presses his palm against the small bandage wrapped around his cut fingers, and winces. Then he stands, quiet, careful not to wake the girl asleep in the next room. By 5:40, the smell of eggs and turkey bacon fills the small kitchen. Darian moves through the space like he's done this every morning for years, because he has. Plates out, juice poured, backpack checked twice for homework folders. Nia shuffles in wearing mismatched socks, hair still tangled from sleep, and drops into her chair without a word. She's 11, sharp-eyed, and she notices everything, including the bandage on her father's hand. "What happened?" she asks, pointing her fork at his fingers. Dropped a glass, Darian says. Nothing big. She studies him a second longer than necessary, the way kids do when they sense a story is being shortened for their benefit. Then she goes back to her eggs, and the moment passes. 5 years ago, this kitchen looked different. Darian owned a software consulting firm with 11 employees and a name on the door. His wife, Renee, ran the books and kept everyone fed on Fridays with dishes from her grandmother's recipe box. Life had shape then. Direction. Then Renee got sick. Slow at first, then all at once. The bills piled higher than the company's profits could climb. Darian sold the firm to a competitor for less than it was worth, just to clear the medical debt before it swallowed them both. 6 months later, Renee was gone, and Darian was a single father with a mortgage, a daughter, and a resume full of a life he no longer had access to. He could have started another company. People told him to. Investors even called, offering seed money to rebuild. He said no every time. A restaurant job meant predictable hours, health insurance, a schedule that let him be home by 9 most nights, in time to check homework and read 1 chapter of whatever book Nia was working through. Success, to most people, means titles and skylines and headlines. To Darian, it means eggs on the table at 6 in the morning and a daughter who still tells him about her day without hesitation. He remembers the day he handed over the keys to his old office. The new owner shook his hand, thanked him for the smooth transition, then asked why a man with his skill set would ever consider waiting tables. Darian just smiled and said, "Some things aren't about skill. Some things are about who's waiting for you when you get home." That answer confused people back then. It still does. Friends from his old life check in sometimes. Careers rising, invitations to conferences he never attends anymore. He doesn't resent them. He just measures his days differently now. 1 dinner, 1 bedtime story, 1 Tuesday afternoon at a time. After breakfast, Nia grabs her backpack, and Darian walks her the 4 blocks to school, like always, hand near her shoulder, not holding it, because she's 11 now, and too old for that, or so she claims. At the classroom door, she turns back suddenly. "Dad, I wrote something for class. Extra credit essay." "About what?" "You'll see," she says, and disappears through the door, before he can ask more. That evening, alone in the apartment while Nia is at a friend's house, Darian finds the essay draft printed and left on the kitchen table, like she wanted him to find it. The title sits at the top in her careful handwriting. "My dad is the richest man I know." He reads it standing up, one hand braced on the counter, throat tightening with every paragraph. She writes about the eggs, the walks to school, the way he never misses a single school play, even the boring ones. She writes that rich isn't about money, it's about a man who shows up, every single day, without fail. He folds the paper carefully and sets it in his wallet, right behind the photo of Renee he still carries. The next afternoon, picking Nia up from school, he waits by the fence with the other parents. He watches her walk out, backpack heavy on her shoulders, laughing with a friend. Then the laughter stops. A boy near the gate says something, low enough that Darian can't hear the words, but loud enough to make Nia's face fall in an instant. "Your dad is just a waiter," the boy says, smirking, kicking a rock across the pavement, like the comment cost him nothing at all. Nia freezes. Her eyes flick toward her father, checking if he heard. He did. He doesn't say anything right away. He just walks toward her, slow and steady, and holds out his hand. She takes it without a word, and for once, she doesn't care that she's 11, and supposedly too old for hand-holding. They walk home in silence, the essay still folded behind the photo in his wallet. A truth she wrote down that the world outside their front door doesn't seem ready to believe yet. The video plays for the 4th time on a phone screen in a private club 3 floors above the city, and Graham Holloway laughs the same way each time, like the joke gets funnier with repetition. "Watch his face," Graham says to the men around him. "Right there. That's the moment they break." The clip shows a different waiter, a different night, another restaurant. A young man's hands trembling as Graham berates him over a seating mix-up. Graham has dozens of these clips saved, cataloged, shared quietly among a circle of men who find humiliation entertaining as long as it isn't aimed at them. He believes pressure reveals character. He's said it in interviews, dressed up in language about leadership and standards. What he doesn't say publicly is how much he enjoys the moment someone's composure cracks in front of him. His inner circle rarely questions him. They laugh when he laughs, order what he orders, and nod along when he explains why the world rewards men who take what they want. One of them, a younger investor named Preston, watches the clip a fifth time and asks, almost carelessly, whether Graham ever worries about being recorded. Graham waves the question away, like smoke. People forget in a week, he says. Nobody remembers the waiter's name. They remember mine. He believes it completely. He has built an entire life on the assumption that consequences belong to other people. The kind of people who serve his table or manage his portfolio. Never the kind of people who sit where he sits. Across town, in a glass office 40 floors above the financial district, Elise Carrington reviews a folder her assistant left on her desk that morning. Photos, public records, a resume that doesn't match a waiter's uniform at all. Darian Knox, founder and former CEO of a software consulting firm with contracts across 3 states, respected in engineering circles before he vanished from the industry almost entirely. Community volunteer, coaching a youth coding class on weekends at a public library 2 neighborhoods from where he lives now. None of it matches the man she watched kneel on a restaurant floor collecting broken glass with his bare hands. She reads the coaching program details twice. Every Saturday morning, rain or heat, Darian shows up at a public library with a stack of donated laptops, teaching kids from the neighborhood how to build simple websites and small games. No pay, no publicity. A local paper ran one short piece about it 2 years ago, 3 paragraphs buried on page 9, and that's the only public record of it existing at all. She flips another page and stops cold. A rejection letter, dated 3 years back, turning down an executive offer worth £2 million from a firm eager to bring him back into the industry. No explanation attached, just a short, polite decline. Her assistant knocks and steps in. "Ma'am, the board wants your projections for the Holloway acquisition by Friday." Elise doesn't look up right away. "Tell them Friday is fine." She's been building this quietly for months. A confidential effort to acquire Graham's company while it teeters on the edge of collapse behind its polished exterior. Nobody outside a small circle of lawyers and bankers knows it's happening. Not the press, not Graham himself, certainly not Darian. "There's something else," her assistant adds. "The video from the restaurant. It's circulating in a private group chat. Someone recorded the whole exchange." Elise's jaw tightens. She hasn't decided yet what to do with what she saw that night, or how much it has to do with the acquisition she spent half a year building in secret. "Keep monitoring it," she says. "Don't respond to anyone asking questions." That evening, she sits in her car outside the restaurant for 11 minutes before going in. She isn't there for the food. She tells herself she's there to confirm details for due diligence, gathering intelligence on how Graham behaves when he thinks no one important is watching. Her assistant asks over the phone if she wants him to join her. She says no. Some things, she explains, are easier to observe alone, without the pressure of an audience shaping what people show you. He doesn't argue. He's worked for her long enough to know when a decision is already made. Inside, the restaurant hums with its usual quiet luxury, candlelight bouncing off polished glasses, low conversation rolling between tables, like a tide that never quite reaches the shore. She takes the same corner table as before, orders the same simple dish, and waits. But when Darian walks past her table later that night, refilling water glasses, moving with the same quiet composure he had the night of the wine glass, she catches herself watching him a beat too long. She decides, sitting there with her hands folded on the white tablecloth, that she needs to speak to him. Not as a CEO, not as an investor circling a wounded company. Just as a woman who watched a man absorb public humiliation with more grace than she's seen in boardrooms full of powerful people. She has no idea yet how complicated that simple decision is about to become. Darian steps out the back entrance of the restaurant at 11:40. jacket over one arm, exhaustion pulling at his shoulders, and stops cold when he sees her leaning against the brick wall. Elise Carrington. Standing outside a service exit in a neighborhood she has no obvious reason to be in, at an hour when most CEOs are asleep or still working from a corner office, not waiting in an alley behind a kitchen. "Miss Carrington," Darian says, careful, unsure why his pulse just picked up speed. "Is something wrong?" "No," she says. "I wanted to talk to you. Somewhere that isn't your job." He glances toward the street, then back at her, weighing whether this is some kind of setup connected to the humiliation from days earlier, some new angle he hasn't seen coming yet. In his experience, wealthy people rarely show up in person unless they want something, and he's learned to be careful about what that something might cost him. "How long have you been standing here?" he asks. "Long enough to almost change my mind twice," she admits, and there's an honesty in it that catches him off guard. "I have a proposal," she continues, before he can ask. "A senior position, strategy and operations. I've read your background. You built something real once. I think you could build something real again." Darian lets out a short breath, almost a laugh, but there's no humor in it. "I appreciate that, truly, but no." She blinks, genuinely thrown. People don't say no to her. Not investors, not competitors, not board members who disagree with her in private and fold the moment she pushes back in public. "Can I ask why?" "I promised my daughter I'd be home every evening," Darian says. Simple, no dramatics in his voice. Executive roles don't come with that kind of promise. Mine does. Elise studies his face under the streetlight, searching for the catch, the hidden ambition, the part of him angling for a better offer. She doesn't find it. Just a tired man who means exactly what he said. "You'd walk away from £2 million for that," she says slowly, remembering the rejection letter in her folder. "You've done it before." His eyes narrow slightly. "You looked into my background." "I did." He doesn't get angry. He just nods, like he expected as much from a woman who runs a technology empire built on knowing things before anyone else does. "Then you already know the answer isn't about the money." "It never was. Most people would take the offer and figure out the rest later," she says. "You didn't even ask about salary, benefits, equity, because none of that fixes the problem," Darian answers. "A bigger paycheck doesn't make the hours shorter. It just makes the missing dinners more expensive." She has no response for that. In 6 years of building her company, nobody on her team has ever framed ambition as something with a cost attached, at least not one worth naming out loud in a back alley at midnight. They stand there a moment, the city noise distant behind them, an odd kind of quiet settling between two people who understand each other more than either expected to, only minutes into a conversation neither planned. "I haven't had dinner with my own parents in 6 years, Elise says suddenly, the words slipping out before she can stop them. She doesn't know why she's telling him this. "I keep meaning to. There's always a deal, a deadline, something more urgent." Darian watches her carefully. "Sounds like you already know what you're missing." The comment lands harder than he intends. Elise looks away first, out toward the empty street, processing something that clearly has nothing to do with acquisitions or board meetings. "Thank you for the offer," Darian says finally, softer now. "But I need to get home. My daughter waits up." He turns to leave. She doesn't stop him. She just watches him walk toward the subway entrance, hands in his pockets, shoulders finally relaxed for the first time all night. Neither of them notices the man across the street, phone raised, camera lens catching the two of them standing together outside the alley, timestamp marking the exact minute everything is about to get complicated. He's been paid to follow her for 2 days now, hired by someone who prefers to stay unnamed, someone with a grudge and deep enough pockets to make watching a stranger's life feel like a paying job. He lowers the phone, smiles at what he just captured, and disappears down the block before either of them turns around. The headline hits Darian's phone at 6 in the morning, and his coffee goes cold in his hand before he even finishes reading the first line. CEO's secret late-night meeting with waiter Sparks. Questions. The photo is grainy, taken from across the street, but clear enough. Him and Elise standing close outside the restaurant, faces lit by a single street lamp. The caption beneath it asks more questions than it answers, and every one of them stings. Nia walks into the kitchen, already dressed for school, and stops when she sees her father's face. "Dad? What's wrong?" He turns the phone screen away before she can see it, but it's too late. Her friends have phones too, and by lunchtime, half her class will have seen the same photo, dressed up with worse captions than the article itself carries. At the restaurant that evening, the manager pulls Darian aside before his shift even starts. "This isn't good for the brand," he says, voice low, apologetic in the way people are when they're about to say something they know is unfair. "Some of our regular guests are asking questions." "I haven't done anything wrong," Darian says. I know that. But perception is its own kind of problem here." Across town, Graham Holloway reads the same headline with a grin spreading slow across his face. This is opportunity, not scandal, and he knows exactly how to use it. He starts making calls, planting suggestions in the ears of people who matter, hinting that the waiter manipulated his way close to Elise Carrington for reasons that have nothing to do with dinner conversation. Everyone loves a rags-to-riches scheme, Graham tells one of his associates over the phone, laughing at his own cleverness, especially when it turns out the poor man was playing the long game the whole time. The rumor spreads fast, the way rumors do when someone with money and motive decides to feed it. By the next morning, 3 more blogs have picked up variations of the story, each one darker than the last, each one further from the truth. Graham doesn't stop there. He reaches out to a reporter he's fed stories to before, someone who owes him a favor from an old deal nobody talks about anymore. Within hours, a new article appears, quoting an unnamed source close to Elise Carrington, who claims the waiter has been asking about her net worth since the night they met. It's a lie built entirely from nothing, but lies don't need truth to travel. They only need someone willing to click share. At school, the boy from the fence finds Nia again, this time with a phone in his hand instead of just words. "Your dad's all over the internet," he says, smug, holding the screen toward her like a trophy. "Everyone's saying he's using that lady for money." Nia doesn't cry in front of him. She waits until she's home, door closed, before the tears finally come, muffled into her pillow, so her father won't hear through the thin apartment walls. But he hears anyway. He always does. That night, sitting on the edge of her bed, he doesn't offer excuses or explanations she's too young to fully understand yet. He just holds her hand and tells her that sometimes people believe the loudest story instead of the true one, and that it takes time, sometimes more time than feels fair, for the truth to catch up. "Do you regret it?" Nia asks quietly. Talking to her, Darian thinks about it, really thinks, before answering. "No," he says. "I regret that people decided what happened before they knew anything at all." 2 days later, restaurant management calls him into the office again, and this time there's a different tone in the room, colder, more final. Darian sits across from a man twice his age who won't quite meet his eyes. "We need to let you go," the manager says. "It's not personal. It's business." 6 years, Darian says quietly. 6 years and not one complaint against my name until a billionaire decided to make a scene. The manager looks down at his desk, unable to hold Darian's gaze. "I know this isn't fair. I've told ownership that. But the calls haven't stopped, and I have a business to protect." Darian doesn't argue. He just nods, collects his apron off the hook behind the door, and walks out into the afternoon light without another word, wondering how he's going to explain this one to his daughter tonight. Across the city, in her glass office 40 floors up, Elise opens an envelope that arrived without a return address. Inside are documents, financial records, internal memos, all pointing to years of Graham Holloway quietly sabotaging 3 separate competitors through back-channel deals and manufactured scandals. Her hands go still on the desk. Whoever sent this knows exactly what they're doing, and exactly what it could mean for the acquisition she spent half a year building in complete silence. The folder hits the boardroom table with a sound sharp enough to make 3 lawyers flinch. "Read it," Elise says, standing at the head of the table, arms crossed. All of it. Her legal team flips through pages of falsified subsidiary reports, buried debt, and sabotage timelines stretching back 3 years. Graham Holloway's signature appears on document after document, each one a small crime that adds up to something much larger. Elise has spent 6 weeks building a case nobody else could see coming. Tonight, she finally says the words out loud. "We're acquiring Holloway Industries." Quietly, before he knows what's happening, one of the lawyers looks up, stunned. "You've been sitting on this since before the restaurant incident?" "Longer," she says. And there it is, the answer nobody has asked her directly until now. The reason she stood in that dining room and watched a man humiliate his waiter without saying a single word in protest. If she had confronted Graham that night, if she had defended Darian publicly the way every instinct told her to, the confidential negotiations would have collapsed instantly. Graham would have pulled his financials, buried the evidence deeper, lawyered up before federal investigators ever got close. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was the only way to make sure the truth would actually stick. She thinks about Darian's face that night, the calm way he absorbed the insult and walked away. She thinks about how he must have judged her for saying nothing, for sitting comfortably while he took the hit alone. He has no idea what her silence cost her. Across town, Graham Holloway sits in his penthouse office, unaware that the walls around him are already collapsing. His accountant calls twice that evening. He doesn't pick up either time. He's too busy reviewing quarterly projections that look healthy on the surface, numbers he's spent years hiding behind. He has weeks left. He doesn't know it yet. Elise pulls a fresh document from the folder, a legal notice addressed not to Graham, but to Darian Knox. Her stomach tightens. Graham found out about the alley photograph, found out about the rumors, and now, desperate to control the narrative before his empire falls apart, he's decided to strike first. He's filing a defamation lawsuit against Darian, claiming the restaurant incident and the leaked photo were staged together to damage his reputation. It's baseless. It's petty, and it's about to become very public. Elise stares at the notice, feeling something shift in her chest. Not fear, but resolve. She picks up her phone and dials a number she hasn't used in weeks. "Mr. Knox," she says when he answers. "We need to talk, tonight, it's important." On the other end, Darian sits at his kitchen table, staring at an envelope he received an hour earlier. The same legal notice, already delivered to his door. "I already know," he says quietly. "I just got served." The lawyer's office smells like fresh coffee and old paper, but Darian can't focus on either. "Settle," the attorney says, sliding a document across the table. "Sign this, issue a public apology," and Holloway drops the lawsuit within the week. Clean, fast, over. Darian doesn't touch the paper. An apology for what? "I didn't do anything wrong." Doesn't matter. Lawsuits aren't about truth. They're about who can afford to keep fighting the longest. Elise sits across the room, arms folded, watching Darian carefully. "I can cover your legal costs," she says. "Every dollar. You won't spend a single night worrying about money." Darian shakes his head immediately. "No. Darian, no." His voice stays calm, but firm enough to end the conversation. "I appreciate it. I do. But I'm not going to let anyone fight my battles for me. Not you, not anyone. I've spent 5 years standing on my own 2 feet. I'm not stopping now." Elise studies him, frustration and admiration tangled together in her expression. She's used to people accepting help the moment it's offered. Darian isn't most people. That night, alone in his apartment, Darian sits across from Nia at the kitchen table, homework forgotten between them. "Are you scared?" she asks quietly. He considers lying, then decides against it. "A little," he admits, "but being scared and being wrong aren't the same thing. I know what's true. That has to be enough." Nia doesn't respond right away. She just leans her head against his shoulder, and for a moment, neither of them says anything at all. 3 days before the hearing, Darian's phone rings. An unfamiliar number. "Mr. Knox, my name is Terrence Yarborough. I used to work for Graham Holloway." Darian sits up straighter. "Okay. I saw what happened at the restaurant. It wasn't the first time. I've watched him do this to a dozen people over 4 years. I stayed quiet because I needed the paycheck." Terrence's voice tightens. I don't want to stay quiet anymore. I want to testify. Darian grips the phone, heart pounding. Why now? Because somebody finally stood up and didn't back down, Terrence says. That took guts. Figured it's time I found mine. Darian thanks him, hangs up, and sits in silence for a long moment, staring at the ceiling. He thinks about the wine glass shattering on marble, about the wet floor, about the calm, steady words that walked him out of that dining room instead of into a shouting match. He never imagined that moment would ripple outward this far, reaching people he'd never met, cracking open silence that had lasted years. The hearing is set for Monday morning. Elise calls one final time before the weekend ends, her voice quieter than usual. Whatever happens in that courtroom, she says, you already won something no lawsuit can take away. Darian doesn't fully understand what she means. Not yet. But by Monday afternoon, the whole courtroom will. The courtroom doors close, and Graham Holloway's confident smile is still in place when the first witness takes the stand. It doesn't stay there long. Terrence Yarborough sits straight-backed, hands folded, voice steady, as he describes 4 years of humiliation disguised as leadership. He talks about interns reduced to tears in front of clients, about a doorman fired after refusing to laugh at Graham's jokes, about recorded clips passed around private group chats for entertainment. He didn't just embarrass people, Terrence says, he collected it, like trophies. Graham's attorney objects twice. The judge overrules both times. Next, restaurant security footage plays on a screen at the front of the room. Every eye watches the wine glass shatter, watches Graham's mocking smile, watches Darian kneel down and clean broken glass with steady, unshaking hands. Then the room hears it again, the same 6 words that silenced a dining room weeks ago. Go ahead, mock me again. Several jurors shift in their seats. One woman covers her mouth. Graham's legal team requests a recess. The judge denies it. More witnesses follow. A former assistant, a junior analyst. Each one adds another layer to a pattern too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. Then Darian's attorney rises and introduces something unexpected, not as legal evidence, but as context for the court to understand the man they're discussing. Nia's school essay. The teacher reads it aloud at the request of the defense, her voice steady despite the weight of the room. She reads about a father who chose stability over ambition, presence over profit, a man whose daughter believes he's rich in every way that actually matters. The courtroom falls silent in a different way now. Not shocked, moved. Even Graham's own legal team shifts uncomfortably, papers forgotten in their hands. Graham sits rigid at his table, jaw tight, watching his carefully built image dissolve in real time. He built an empire on the idea that power means never being challenged. Today, in this room, that idea collapses piece by piece. The judge finally speaks, voice measured and firm. Given the volume of testimony presented today, this court will take time to review all evidence before issuing a ruling. Graham stands abruptly, chair scraping against the floor, and storms out through a side door without waiting for his attorneys. Outside, reporters wait with cameras raised, shouting questions Darian doesn't answer. He walks past them with Nia's hand in his, calm, unshaken, the same way he walked out of that restaurant weeks earlier. Elise watches from across the hallway, arms crossed, something unreadable behind her eyes. The judge promised a ruling, but nobody in that courtroom expects what happens next, because justice, when it finally arrives, doesn't always look the way people imagine it will. The headline breaks before Graham's morning coffee even cools. Holloway Industries loses 3 major investors overnight. He stares at his phone, refreshing the same page again and again, waiting for the numbers to change. They don't. Board members who once laughed at his jokes now avoid his calls entirely. Contracts dissolve. Partnerships end with short, cold emails. It isn't one lawsuit that breaks him. It's years of quiet cruelty finally catching up all at once, the way debt always does eventually. Across the city, Elise finalizes the acquisition of Holloway Industries with a single signature, calm and unhurried. Nothing like the dramatic takeover people expected. She doesn't gloat. She doesn't issue a public statement mocking Graham's downfall. Instead, she restructures the company from the inside, offering positions to employees Graham mistreated for years. The doorman he fired, the assistant who left in tears, dozens of others who stayed silent out of fear. Justice, she's learned, doesn't need an audience. It just needs to be real. That evening, she calls Darian and asks him to meet her at a quiet coffee shop instead of a boardroom. "I have an offer," she says, sliding a folder across the table. "Not an executive title, not a corner office." Darian opens it slowly. Inside is a proposal for a company-wide mentorship program. Dignity in the workplace, respect for every employee regardless of position. A culture built from the ground up instead of enforced from the top down. "You'd design it," Elise says. "Lead it, on your terms, your hours." Darian studies the pages for a long moment, saying nothing. "I'm not asking because I feel sorry for you," Elise adds quietly. "I'm asking because you're the only person I've met who never once needed saving." Darian doesn't answer right away. He folds the paper closed and slides it back toward her, not in refusal, but in thought. That night, Nia finds him sitting on the back steps of their apartment, staring up at nothing in particular. "Dad," she says, sitting beside him, "what kind of future do you actually want?" The question sits heavier than she probably intends. Darian wraps an arm around her shoulders, quiet for a long moment before answering. "One where I don't have to choose between being there for you and building something that matters," he says. "Maybe both are finally possible." Nia leans into him, and for the first time in weeks, neither of them feels like they're bracing for the next headline. Somewhere across the city, Graham Holloway packs a single box from an office that no longer belongs to him. The empire he built on humiliation, finally empty in his hands. 6 months later, 100 new employees fill a conference room that once belonged to Graham Holloway, listening as Darian Knox stands at the front, speaking without notes. "Respect isn't a policy," he tells them. "It's a habit. Practice it even when nobody's watching." The room listens the way people listen to someone who's lived every word he's saying. He accepted Elise's offer on one condition: every weekend stays untouched, reserved for mentoring young fathers in his community, the same way people once showed up for him. Elise agreed without hesitation. Their relationship grew slowly after that, the way real trust always does. No dramatic declarations, no rushed romance, just dinners that started as business meetings and became something neither of them wanted to end early. Respect first. Everything else followed at its own pace. Nia thrives that year, her essay framed and hanging in the hallway of their new home, right beside a photograph of her father shaking hands with former restaurant co-workers who still call him for advice, still consider him family. Graham Holloway disappears from public life entirely, his name fading from headlines within months, remembered by no one except as a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. His downfall was never about one insult, one wineglass, one bad night. It was about years of small cruelties finally arriving at their true cost. Darian never asked for revenge. He never needed it. Quiet integrity did what anger never could. Some people spend their whole lives trying to look powerful, chasing titles and headlines and rooms full of people too afraid to disagree with them. Others spend their lives quietly becoming the kind of people the world learns to trust without needing convincing. Darian Knox never raised his voice that night in the restaurant. He didn't need to. Real strength rarely shouts. It simply refuses to bend. If this story reminded you that dignity is something we give, not something people have to earn, share it with someone who needs that reminder today. If you believe quiet strength deserves more recognition than loud power, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this one. And tell us in the comments, have you ever stayed calm in a moment that would have broken most people? Your story might inspire someone who needs to hear it.